Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Natalie Shapira, and I'm a PhD student in Bar-Ilan University in the Computer Science Department. And in this presentation, I'm going to talk about computational clinical psychology. And later, I will present a work that's related to generative AI that is a specific work under the umbrella of computational clinical psychology. And this story begins several years ago that I thought, I like psychology, I like AI, let's combine them. And I looked for a mentor in the intersection of this subject, and I couldn't find one. But I did find two mentors that collaborating, one from the clinical psychology and one from NLP domain. And at the beginning, I thought that the intersection field between them made of one piece, but I learned to know that actually it's a spectrum. And from my experience, there is a difference between using NLP tools to research the clinical psychology domain, as opposed to using clinical psychology tools to research the NLP domain. And I have the privilege of working with both fields, and my experience was different. And when we are using NLP to research the clinical psychology domain, one should be familiar and control the challenges and motivation and state-of-the-art literature and tools and methodologies and conventions of the clinical psychology domain, while when working with clinical psychology tools to research the NLP domain, one should be familiar with the challenges and motivations and state-of-the-art literature and tools and methodologies and conventions of the NLP domain. And I had the privilege of working on the several different points in this spectrum. And in this presentation, I'm going to talk about a work that uses clinical psychology tools to enhance the field of NLP. And in this work, we examine how well do large language models perform on a FAPA test. And this is a joint work with Guy Tzviren, which is a clinical psychology diagnostician, and Yoav Goldberg, my supervisor. And what is a FAPA test? Let's look at this scenario. James made an apple pie for his girlfriend, and he went to her and said, "Hi, Michal, I made a pie for your birthday." And Michal responds with, "Oh, I love pies except of apple pie." And when she said apple pie, she made a faux pas from France, a false step, which caused an embarrassing for the reader that read the story. And when we want to see if someone understands the situation, we can ask several questions. The first question is, in the story, did someone say something that they should not have said? And the answer is yes. And the next question is, what did they say that they should not have said? And the answer is, oh, I love pies except of apple pie. And the next question is, what did James give Michal for her birthday? And the answer is apple pie. And the last question is, did Michal know James had given her an apple pie for her birthday? And the answer is no, that we can assume that she didn't know that because she didn't want to embarrass him or to make him feel sad. So to conclude this test, the faux pas is the emotion that most people would feel when they reveal the reality of the context, when they made an unintentionally offensive remark due to an unawareness of the context. And this is a theory of mind clinical test, initially developed to diagnose autism or Asperger's syndrome in children between the ages of 7 to 11. And it is considered for a more challenging test than individual tests of theory of mind or social intelligence because it actually combines both tests in one test and requires both skills at the same time. But here, we do not diagnose models. In the first study, we evaluate LLM's performance as an NLP task. We used 20 original stories from the clinical test and evaluate 14 different models. And we found that actually models struggle with this task even when they appear to correct, and the seemingly correct responses can be attributed to overinterpretation of the reader. We call this is actually the Elase effect. It's a term that Weizenbaum coined several years ago, which describe a phenomenon where individual may attribute understanding to a machine based on its ability to respond in a seemingly intelligent manner, even if the response does not fully answer the question. And here is an example how ChatGPT responded to a question for a faux pas story. At the bottom, there is a faux pas story, and then the question in the story, did someone say something that they should not have said? And the correct answer should be yes. And ChatGPT start to answer with, it doesn't seem like anyone said anything in the story that they should not have said, which is incorrect. But then later it says, this statement might be perceived as ungrateful or rude, and this is correct. So when I saw this response, I was a bit confused and I didn't know how to score it. And I consulted Guy, a clinical psychology diagnostician, and he says, of course, it didn't understand the situation. And I wasn't convinced, and Guy insists that it is obvious and it is not related to the fact that he is a clinical psychology diagnostician. And my supervisor suggests me to try to restrict the model and to ask it to answer with yes or no only. So I tried it, and now ChatGPT answers with no, which is wrong. Now I was convinced that ChatGPT struggled with this task, and actually I was Elase affected. And what about generation? In the second study, we examine, is it possible to use LLMs to generate faux pas stories? And we found that some models can generate novel faux pas stories, but the stories were all explicit. And here we have an example of a ChatGPT generated story. Let's read it together. At a dinner party, Claire was telling a story about a trip she took. She mentioned a woman in the story, and not realizing that the woman was one of the guests at the dinner party, said she was the most annoying person I have ever met. Where this is a faux pas, but the problem here that the situation, not realizing that the woman was one of the guests, is explicitly described, while in the faux pas test, we want to test exactly this. This is a key point. We want to see if the reader can understand Claire's theory of mind, and this is explicitly written here. We manually annotated this story. We fixed it to describe the same story in an implicit manner. In the bottom rectangle, there is our fix. Let's read it together. At a dinner party, Ruth arrived alone. Suddenly, she saw Claire. She got closer and heard Claire telling a story about the trip they took together. Claire mentioned Ruth. She was the most annoying person I've ever met. Ruth coughed and said, "Hi, Claire." And in this story, it is written explicitly that Ruth saw Claire, but it is not written whether Claire saw Ruth. And we expect the reader to reason about the fact that she wasn't aware of Ruth in the dinner party, because then she wouldn't say the offensive remark. And a side note about presupposition question. So before talking about presupposition question, let's hear a different scenario. In this scenario, James made an apple pie as before, and he came to Michal and said, "Hi Michal, I made a pie for your birthday," but now Michal responds with, "Oh, I love pies except of strawberry pie." And here we do not have a FAPA, we call it control story. And in a control story, when we ask, in this story, did someone say something that they should not have said? The answer should be no, there is nothing bad. And in the second question, when we ask, what did they say that they should not have said? This question is a bit tricky because there is nothing that they should not have said, so the answer should be nothing. But actually, LLMs response for supposition question with either picking an arbitrary utterance or generating a delusional text. Here we can see an example. In this scenario, GPT 3.5 answer for the first question with no, which is correct. But for the second question, it answers with, oh, I love pies except of strawberry pie, which is incorrect. And to conclude, we want models to have social and psychological skills, and the FAPA test is a good way to test it. We saw interesting findings, and in the bottom line, current state-of-the-art models struggle with this task, so we have still a way to go in our research. Thank you.